The style in which Revelation is written enjoys all the freedom of poetic expression. It appeals to the fluidity of imagination, not to the inflexibility of logic. The wedding supper is not a specific feast that takes place before the millennium. It depicts, rather, the eternal relationship between Christ and those who have accepted his love. The wedding supper lasts forever. So Robert H. Mounts, what he's saying is what we've kind of come to a consensus to as we've been studying this chapter the past couple weeks, that when you have these two seemingly separate entities, the bride of Christ and the guests to that wedding, these both are different symbols that both represent the church. They the aspect of the guest represents a certain aspect of the church and is a symbolic way of understanding a certain aspect of who the saints are and their relationship to Christ and the call even of the gospel to invite those who are invited. And then the aspect of the church being the bride, that's just simply another symbol to describe who the church is. So this is really no different than the fact that there's some places where in the New Testament the church is very obviously referred to as sheep. We are the sheep of God. But then other places we are referred to as the bride. There's very clear places where the church is very clearly referred to as the bride. This is no different. It's no different that in Revelation, again, this apocalyptic literature, that it would refer to the church as both guests and bride. So
Kelsey had something good on that. Kelsey had a good thing on how words are,
jump into that.
Well, I mean, the WMS, they're the first to say, one word can have multiple meanings depending on the context. And, it also extends to, a person can be represented. Even within WMSCOG theology, a person can be represented by multiple different people. Like Jesus was represented, according to them, by King David, and Jesus was also represented by Melchizedek, right? So just because Jesus was represented by, King David, doesn't mean he can't also be represented by Melchizedek.
Exactly.
In the same way, like the church, right? The church can be represented, as you mentioned, by the sheep, right? It can be represented by the bride, and it can be represented by the guests to this wedding supper. And also one other thing that we talked about before too is in verse 7, it says, "Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, his bride has made herself ready." Oh, verse 8, "Fine linen, bright and clean, was given her to wear." So this bride is wearing the fine linen, bright and clean,
which was granted. That word is so important. Granted, it's like this bride was given permission.
Right.
Why would Mother God need permission?
She would be granting.
Amen.
She wouldn't be granted.
Yes.
Right?
Totally.
But when you see same chapter 19, but verse 14, so just a few verses later, it says, "The armies of heaven were following him being Christ, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean." So we can see that within this context, the bride is clearly talking about the saints.
Right. It's using those same words, fine linen, this fine linen,
right,
that the armies of heaven are wearing fine linen. No, but this is obviously the saints, the people of God are the armies of heaven here, white and pure. And the same language used in verse 8 about this bride who was given fine linen, bright and pure to wear. And so this is definitely the bride. This is just another example of what we're talking about right in front of our face. In this, not only is the church here being referred to as bride and guests, but they're also being referred to as the armies. Like not only is this king have the church as his bride, but the church is also his guest, and the church is also his army. And so this is very obviously just the nature of apocalyptic literature, taking these liberties to use all this variety of symbolism in the same setting.
Jordan, let me also go back to Ephesians 5. So this is where they try to say things can have two meanings, but in Ephesians 5, the passage where they admit that the bride can be the church, tell me this is not reminiscent of Revelation 19:8. It says, "Husband loves your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, clean cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might
that's
present
a
her
great-
to himself, the church,
Yeah.
in all their glory, having no spot or wrinkle
Yeah.
or
Brilliant.
anything, that she would be
Yeah.
holy and blameless. So again, that language,
That's a
the
brilliant
Pauline,
point, Steve.
right? So the Pauline language there, in the context of the bride being the church, complete cross-reference, Revelation 19:8, Ephesians
Yeah.
5:28.
It's so clear.